Hi, welcome to Galavante's Tastemaker series, where we bring you fascinating people from all over the world. Today, we are going to be talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is food. It is summertime, and it is time to grill. And we wanted to teach you how to make the perfect steak on the grill, and also talk about one of my favorites, which is Florentine steak, that has me really missing Florence. And when we were looking for the right expert to talk to about grilling, I came across this incredible woman. Yes, you heard that, a woman grill master. They are few and far between to get to find, but we found this incredible woman, Robyn, who is based out of Florida, and she knows everything and anything about steak. So Robyn is here with us today. Robyn, hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me in my Jersey Shore remote, satellite office today.
Well,
So,
you got to take advantage of this working from home while we can.
absolutely, and the weather here is so nice. Being in Florida, this is almost like our winter time because it's so stinking hot and it rains every day. So, when it hits like the 70s or only the mid 80s in summer, that's the perfect time of year. So that's why it really is grilling season for everyone, this time of year, versus for me, I'm lucky that it's kind of year round.
Well, Robyn, I'm so fascinated because, like I mentioned, even when I'm in the Hamptons or I'm vacationing around, it's always the guys manning the grill. How did you get to man the grill?
What's funny is I've just always liked to cook and I've always been very curious about everything. And I'm very much one of those people that just digs in and tries things myself. And I actually ended up grilling mainly because I went to go use, now he's my husband, but he was my boyfriend at the time. I went to go use his grill one night and he was out of town and I wanted to grill some chicken or something, and I pretty much burned my eyebrows off trying to use his old crappy grill. And then I was like, I can't believe that just happened. That was dumb. I don't want that to happen again. So I bought him a new grill. And at the time, I was in like my late 20s, early 30s. I bought him like, a top of the line grill. And out of practicality's sake, I wanted to use that grill and get my money's worth. And then I really fell in love with grilling. And I was like, why are more women not grilling? This is a lot of fun, And then I realized, while it's a great opportunity to spend time outdoors and get out of the house, it's also a great way to really cook and create less dishes. And I just felt like what a missed opportunity for women to not being enjoying this experience, and especially in a time in these days where you don't really have gender roles anymore. You've got guys staying home watching the kids, and but yet it's so odd that as soon as a grill comes out, it's like automatically it's a man's domain, and the women are stuck inside making the side dishes. So that's how my blog, because I have a journalism degree and I've always been, a writer, but that's kind of how my blog morphed from just documenting recipes that I tried that worked out really well to being and starting Grill Girl, where, my slant was really all about healthy grilling, but also empowering women to grill and trying to just demystify grilling, because I feel like anyone that can cook in the kitchen can cook on the grill. You know what I mean? Like it's a heat source, and if you can think about how you use your oven, you got your broiler, you got your ambient heat. That's the same as a grill. That's basically direct and indirect grilling right there. So I just try to simplify it and show people that it's really not rocket science, and that like little old pipsqueak me can do it, that anybody can do it. Like I think a lot of people also think if like they see a women pit master per se, that they're kind of like burly or rough around the edges, and that's not me. I like to host dinner parties and grill and drink wine with my girlfriends, and that's really kind of what it's all about, is having fun outside.
Well, I love women pushing boundaries. So kudos to you for opening up this boundary for us, because you described me to perfection. I know my way around a kitchen, but when it comes to the grill, I'm completely intimidated. And especially with steak. Steak is something that, for me, I normally sear the steak inside on a cast iron skillet and then I pop it into the oven because it's super easy. But the moment you get me around the grill, it's like I've never seen a steak before. So first, I would love to hear, like, when I'm thinking about hosting a dinner party for the summer, a barbecue, what are my options what kinds of steak work best on the grill?
I think, what can be interesting about steak is that when you talk about grilling steak, everyone has their own preference on temperature, which can be, to me, kind of annoying because I hate taking a good steak and overcooking it, for example, to please like my mother-in-law, you know? So that's why I think, you know, there are some cuts that really kind of work well, and that everybody has like their own version of what they like. I think if you can buy like a whole tenderloin, you can you know, sear it and then finish it like basically like what you said, but on the grill, the same way you do cast iron, where you sear and then finish in the oven. That's essentially called the, you know, like well, I use what's called the reverse sear, which basically is the opposite of that, where on the grill, you create a direct zone directly over the coals, and then you have an indirect zone. And then you sear it first on the direct side, and then you can bring it to continue to cook on the indirect side. So it's still getting that nice, you know, you're still getting that smoke flavor from the charcoal, but you're not continuing to cook it over direct heat, so you don't burn the crap out of it, right? I think the other thing to think about is using a meat thermometer is going to be your best friend. And honestly, not just for steaks, but just in the kitchen. You know, I use my meat thermometer, or my thermometer that I use for steaks. I use that when I am frying to make sure I'm getting the right temperature. If you ever make candy. So I recommend like a thermopen, which is kind of the standard in the world of cooking and grilling. But now there's a lot of, you know, technology out there. But I'd say the one to look for is anything that has like a 3-second read, meaning, you know, you're not standing there letting all the heat escape from your grill. So I think a tenderloin, that's kind of on the higher end of being expensive, but that gives you options. You can cook it whole, or you can slice it up and then cook it to everyone's preference using your meat thermometer as far as temperature. One that I like to do that I think is easier is the tri-tip. And so, you know, we're East Coast girls. Tri-tip is not as popular on the East Coast, but when you go to California, basically that's kind of like their steak or their barbecue. You know, if you start talking about like Santa Maria style grilling, that's the tri-tip. And so it's harder to find on the East Coast, but basically what I love about the tri-tip, and if you look on my website, I have I'm pretty sure I have a blog about this, or multiple blogs, but I even share like where the part is on the cow. But what's interesting about it is that it's kind of a triangular cut, and it comes from the like the sirloin area. But because it's triangular, what happens is that the part on the end, the tip, cooks faster than the wider part of the triangle. And so what I love about that is that then the part on the tip is always going to be cooked more than the part in the middle. And then you really have almost like a temperature for everybody when you're having a dinner party. So the person who wants something really well done, they can have the end of the very end of the triangle, if you will, the skinny part of the triangle. And then for those who want it more medium or medium rare, you can go towards the middle of the tri-tip, and that's going to be like for them. And what's beautiful about the tri-tip is that it's not a very expensive cut, but it's more like a cross, if I had to describe it, of like a steak and a roast together. And the leftovers are beautiful for doing like a roast beef style sandwich with like a horseradish like sour cream, you know. So I think it's actually, and that's another thing you could do for a dinner party, is if you wanted to make it go further, you could serve it with, you know, like some bread and the horseradish cream, and then you could do kind of like a tri-tip sandwich as well.
Oh, that sounds delicious. So what I'm hearing here is that you have your grill going. So I'm assuming that this is a gas grill, not a fire charcoal grill. Or what do you think is better for grilling steaks? Because I'm hearing indirect heat and direct heat, and I can never get those charcoals exactly the way they need to be.
For me, I think you've got to have charcoal to have the smoke flavor for your steak. But I get it. Not everybody has charcoal grills, but no matter what you're cooking on, you know, for gas grill, if you're going to do direct and indirect, that just means, you know, let's say you just have a 2-burner gas grill. Like my in-laws here have a Weber Spirit. It's a 2-burner gas grill. That means one's on high, one's off, or on very low. And that's going to be your indirect, where it's on low. And when the other one's going to be turned up, and that's where you're basically creating a sear station for yourself. Now, if you have a charcoal grill, you can basically you take your coals and you push them to one side, and that's it. I mean, it's, you know, it's
so much more complicated. So now I know. Like, so I fire up the grill. I'm assuming I get it really hot to start.
Yeah, if you're looking for a good sear, I mean, honestly, if you have your charcoal to one side, that side's going to be hot anyway. If you have a pile of charcoal, with gas, you have a lot more control, obviously. So, in that, you can kind of just crank it up and put it on like 4 to 500, and then, because that's really the temperature you want for a steak. And then the indirect side is still going to be hot and it's going to continue to cook, but you're not right over that heat source. So you're not getting that sear. So you're not overcooking the steak, if you will. You don't want to burn the crap out of it. You want to let it get that nice crust on the outside with the sear, and then, move it to the indirect side and let it continue to cook until you're at that internal temperature that you want. So for me, I like a 125 because I'm a medium rare person, but someone might want more like a medium. So you're going to start working towards like a 135, to get more of a medium. And the other thing I always recommend to people is, the steak is going to continue to cook when you take it off. So give yourself some wiggle room. If you want it to be a 135, then pull it at 130 and let it, and it's going to continue to cook. So it's, you can always undercook a steak, but like, I don't want to curse, but I always say, I make a joke with my husband. I'm like, you can't un-F it, if you know what I mean. Like,
If someone's like, oh, this is too rare, throw it back on the grill for another minute or two, but it doesn't spoil the cut of meat for everyone else.
Exactly. You can always throw it back on, but you can't reverse that process. So it's always better to under versus overcook a steak, in my opinion.
In our show notes and also in our article, we'll have to ask for your advice on the perfect temperatures for the steak, whether you like it rare all the way to well done. So I think that'll help us out a ton, because I'm never going to remember exactly what temperature all the different like levels of cook of steak should be.
Absolutely. And if you go to my website, which is grillgirl.com, I have a steak infographic that if you subscribe to my newsletter, it'll send it to you. And then you can even print it out and just have it handy dandy. Like, like I said, 125 all the way up to 160, which is like, basically you burned your steak. That's okay. We'll still be friends. But, and that way you kind of have a guide. And then you can see in my magazine, I did kind of the, how to cook the perfect steak. And this is actually, you can see we've got the zones here, and this, you can think, well, actually I'm such a we'll say medium rare. We say actually 135. Rare is 125. Excuse me. I misquoted it. I'm so used to cooking everything very pink. So medium 145. Medium well 155, and like I said, you pretty much burned it at 160. So
I think that it's a parents' generation thing, because back when my parents were growing up, they were not getting this high quality steak that's like $50 a pound. You had to cook the heck out of it in order to make sure you didn't get food poisoning. So the higher quality of the meat, of course, the more rare you can have the meat. So
absolutely.
But I respect it. To each his own. I have friends even our age who are like, burn the heck out of the meat. Like, I want it completely charred. And so you take like this very beautiful, expensive piece of meat, you just cut off a little slice for them and you make that exactly to preference. But that's the cool thing about steak. I have a question too. I'm literally peppering you with all the questions I've always had. I dry aged steaks. How does that work? Because I have a really hard time cooking that even indoors, because dry aged doesn't have the same coloring as like a regular piece of meat. So can you tell us a little bit about dry aged and help me understand how to cook that?
Yeah. What's interesting is I like to think about dry aging like wine, like wine gets better. Well, good wines get better over time. Dry aging is basically taking a steak and making it better, because dry aging basically concentrates the flavor. So as it dry ages, you lose moisture and you do lose some bulk on the steak. But what happens is that that mold, that funkiness it gets, actually makes it taste more, it concentrates the flavor and adds a nuttiness to it. And there is a point of no return that you go with dry aging, but if you're buying a dry aged steak, you're basically leaving it up to like a good butcher or someone to to throw it into that, you know, a well-controlled environment where they let it do its thing and really kind of ripen, if you will, almost like a cheese. And then, you know, I believe if you buy it at a butcher, they're going to shave off kind of the yucky anyway, and you're left with what you should be cooking. So you still want to cook it like a normal steak. I think you just don't really, because you spent that much more on it, you really want to make sure not to screw it up. And I think that's why having your meat thermometer, and if you go to my website, I have links to it all over, but I use the Thermapen. You can buy what's called a Thermopop for $30. You can buy a Thermapen for 90. So it just kind of depends on what you want to spend. But you know, those 3-second reads are going to make your life easy, just because once you know, and then you can pull it and make sure you haven't overcooked it.
Dry aged, you cannot do by sight. Dry aged is a science for me. Like when I'm cooking, like I can't be like, oh, that looks like it's ready. You know, like I just kind of have that intuition when it comes to like a normal beef tenderloin, and also the timing is really clear. But dry aged, I should, like, now I'm going to feel more confident because I'm going to use my Thermapen.
Yes, absolutely. Or, you know, whatever you can find, just make sure it gives you. And the other thing is just make sure, I figured this out the hard way, make sure that the batteries are fresh, because when I wrote my cookbook for like 2 weeks, I kept overcooking everything and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And it was because the batteries on my Thermapen were out and it was giving me crazy readings. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, it's always the most simple thing that gets you in the end. But that's like,
yeah. So that's, I have a lot of tips I've learned from things I've learned like the hard way, you know, so hopefully no one else has to go through that.
Someone else's challenges and pitfalls. So we're definitely going to check out your tips that you have on your site, and also your book.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I did a book a couple years ago about actually electric smoking, which I think for some people is like their gateway into smoking. But I think the net of the book is that any of the recipes can be used if you want to add smoke flavor on any smoker. You know, it doesn't have to be an electric smoker. So, you know, even just kind of bringing it back to grilling, once you know how to create a direct and indirect zone, you know how to smoke, because you're going to throw that, you're going to throw the wood on and cook on indirect heat so that you can do low and slow. You know, that's the main thing. And I know that that might be a good segue as to like cuts of meat. I mean, usually barbecue kind of evolved because that's the less desirable, more tough cuts of meat that benefit from low and slow cooking and the infusion of smoke, versus your cuts that are good for grilling, like a steak, like a tenderloin. You know, those are the muscles that, you know, think about the body in the animal that don't get a lot of use, versus the muscles that get a lot of use need a lot more time to just break down to be delicious, and they can be. But you know, it's very much a matter of hot and fast. I'd rather that hot and fast versus low and slow.
And you know, at the beginning of the segment, I talked about Italy, because we bring food home from the world home to our audience. And a lot of us are not traveling to Europe this summer. I envy anyone who is in Italy right now, because normally I'm all over the place in Europe. But in Florence, which is what I've been really, really missing this past couple of years of the pandemic, they have the most beautiful Florentine steaks. Do you have any experience with Florentine steaks? Can you tell us about like what kind of steak they are? How do you ask for it at the butcher? And how would you make something like that on the grill?
So it's funny you mentioned that, because we were supposed to have a family trip to Italy this year as well. My mother-in-law and father-in-law go to Italy actually like twice a year, lucky them. And we were going to have like a whole family thing. And I was like, let's do it. Let's get, you know, let's have someone like come in and we'll do like pasta, which is obviously not my thing, or you know what I mean? I'm not pasta girl, I'm grill girl, you know, and we were just going to do the whole thing. But, you know, really that is just a porterhouse steak essentially. So probably most people don't know. I mean, the T-bone and the porterhouse are very similar. I mean, I think a lot of restaurants interchangeably call them the same thing, but the technical definition is how much fillet and the width of the fillet on the cut, which I believe is 1.25 inches. So, and then also where it comes from on the cow, you know, I think further versus back, how much tenderloin you actually get. So I think a lot of that is just knowing the cut and knowing what to ask for, you know, and if you're one person, you may want a T-bone over a porterhouse, depending on how hungry you are.
Like normally I have like 2 or 3 guys with me and we're all like picking at the big porterhouse steak. So the porterhouse then is premium to the T-bone.
Yes, technically it's
fillet.
Exactly. And as we were talking, the fillet is your most tender cut of meat. Now, what's great about this cut, the porterhouse or the T-bone, is that you've got the New York strip and the fillet. Now, if you're me, I love meat on the bone. I think it's just, I think when it's on the bone, you get the flavor there that you don't get when it's boneless. So that's the value for me. And then of course I take it home and let my dogs chew it in the backyard. I'm that person. So, but that's where I think a lot of the flavor comes, is you get that, a little bit of that fat. To me, it's more juicy. So I'd say, depending on how hungry you are, but also like, I think this is where you can start getting into the quality of the beef. And this is something we touched on in the beginning of the interview, is I think that probably where we are in the world right now, we just have more knowledge about and probably more availability of the types of meat that you might want. Like the 3 main choices you're going to have when you go to the grocery store or your butcher is going to be select, which is basically pretty much like the bottom of the barrel, up to choice, up to prime. And really the main difference is the level of marbling, which is fat. And, in steak, fat equals flavor. So you're going to look for something with more like interstitial marbling, because that makes every bite that much juicier. So, if you go to like, let's just say the grocery store and you look at a New York strip, a not great choice is going to basically have that like strip of fat on the outside, and then it's all red. There's no little pieces of fat that you can see. There's no marbling, and that to me, that's not my steak. So it's like for me, but then again, I'm a steak snob because I've been doing this. So I've been doing this a while and people send me really great steaks, so I'm blessed that way. But then if you look at a good prime worth its money, should have decent marbling all throughout the meat, and that's, and sometimes like I'll go to like Costco, because that's where a lot of people sit. For me, I don't live in the city, and you probably, well, you have them in the city too, but you know what I mean? They have good prices on your meat. But I was looking, and I did a thing on Instagram where I'm looking at the choice versus the prime, and there was barely any difference. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to pay this major difference in price per pound when it looks almost exactly the same as the choice. So, even saying that, I'd say not all prime is created equal, and a lot of it gets down to where the cow comes from and how they're treated and what they're fed and all that good stuff. And I think that's why, at least for me, I've gotten very focused on really understanding who's growing it, how they treat the cows, for a while. And I got very into paleo eating, which really for me helped me realize that there's a lot of crap out there in the grocery store and in the food system that we don't really know what they're doing to the food. And a lot of it's processed. And, so I've gotten to the point where I'm like, if I can't really verify how how my food, what they ate and how they were treated, then I would rather not eat it. You know what I mean? I'd rather pay to have something shipped to my house and eat that, and pay more knowing that I trust the people I bought it from. You know what I mean? And I know not everyone's always in that spot. But these days with mail delivery and everything, you have so many more options than you used to. And now something, and I think this was another thing we were going to get into, is now you've got Wagyu is such a kind of buzzword in the world of steak and beef, and it can be really confusing. And I actually just kind of schooled myself, because then I'll have to give them a shout out, because they've been kind of to like really wanting to support people that you trust. Double Eight Ranch in my magazine was they bought an ad, but this just gives you an example of like, this is a purebred Wagyu steak, and look at that marbling. Like this is what I call steak porn.
Beautiful.
Yeah, like kind of the opposite of what I said before, where you've got, let's just say on a New York strip, you see red, and then you see the fat strip, and that's it. Like this, there's fat all throughout it. And that's now you've got all these different kind of options. And even Wagyu, you've got what's called American Wagyu, which means they took like a full bred Wagyu cow and crossbred it with an Angus. So you've got like a prime that's better than like just an Angus prime at that point, you know? And then for them, they're what's called full blood Wagyu. And this again, I've kind of schooled myself trying to learn more about this to do them justice to understand for the magazine. But in the history of America, they had a short time frame where you could actually import these Wagyu cows from Japan, and then they shut that off. So you can't do it anymore. But those cows that were actually imported from Japan live and exist in America, and those are the ones that are the actual full blood. I think they have a name. It's like Miyazaki. I'm going to mispronounce it, but if you go to Double Eight's website, they actually have. I'm not trying to plug them, but I'm just saying. I mean, I respect them, and their meat is amazing. But they have a Wagyu 101 school basically on their website, which I find very interesting because even for me, as someone who's been cooking steak, I didn't know to the extent, you know what I mean? And so it really kind of it gave me a little steak red pilling on Wagyu, but it's very interesting. And so that way, when you do buy a steak, that way you can at least justify, like, if you're getting something or someone calls itself Wagyu, before you pay the prices, check, is it American Wagyu? Is it Wagyu? You know what I mean? So, but it's great because we do have so many more options these days when we used to. And now you can, essentially find these local farms all over the US and just have them shipped to your door. So you don't have to just rely on what your butcher gets you or what you find at the grocery store, which oftentimes has a markup that, may not be as, maybe not as advantageous to you as if you just bought it, steak e-commerce, if you will.
Well, we're going to have to ask you for some of your favorite places to buy direct from these farmers, because that is actually a great gift. Like when you're going to someone's house, you don't necessarily want to be lugging out the cold packs and bringing the steak over. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to have the experts ship it to your host's house, and then you have the steaks there to grill at night.
Absolutely. And another company I like is they're called Felton Angus Beef. And what's great about social media these days is you can build these connections, right? Like, so I met Susie Felton. They're a small family owned ranch, and you actually get to see on her Instagram feed how great and nice they are to their cows and like what it looks like to be like to work a cattle ranch, and then, it just gives you kind of, it gives me a better feeling knowing that, like, when I do eat steak, that steak had the best life it was going to, it could have before it did meet its demise and end up on my plate. So.
It really matters. The provenance of your ingredients matter. I'm going to ask you one more question, because this is something that's been on my mind whenever I'm like prepping food for a big barbecue. How long do you marinate your steak for? So should you marinate it overnight, and what do you marinate it in?
So for me, I actually don't marinate my steak. If it's a good quality cut, like I don't really think it needs anything. Like if it's a flank steak or a skirt steak, I'll make like a jalapeno lime kind of like, or like a chimichurri type thing. But if it's, or like I think I have a chipotle lime recipe I use a lot. So that's more for like your kind of less quality cuts. But if it's like just a steak, like a ribeye or a New York strip or a picanha or a tri-tip, really for me, I think it's all about just very high quality ingredients. And so I like to slather it on, well, I'll back up and say I do let it get to room temperature for it before I grill it, but I will put some olive oil on it and fresh ground pepper and high quality sea salt. And that's it. Sometimes I add in like smoked paprika just because I want more smoke flavor, because I'm a little bit addicted to smoke flavor. And I will say that if you don't have a charcoal grill, then some options that to add smoke flavor could be using smoked sea salt. Like you can even buy smoked Maldon on Amazon Prime, because I've done it, and have it in your house. Well, and especially in the city. Well, these days, Whole Foods delivers to your house via Amazon. It's so convenient. Praise the Lord for that. But so you can use the smoked sea salt. You can use smoked pepper. There's another company called Bourbon Barrel Foods. They're like a kind of a craft spice company. They they smoke their salt and their pepper on bourbon barrel staves, which is kind of cool. And so for me, you know, it's very minimal ingredients for steak, but the ingredients I use are pretty much, you know, spot on. Or, you know, I actually smoke my own Himalayan salt. You can do that even if you have a gas grill. This is a fun tip. You can buy this thing called a smoker tube, and you basically fill it with wood chips or pellets, and it produces smoke, and you put it on your gas grill. So if you really want to smoke something and you don't have a charcoal grill, which like for you, Christine, you're in New York City, it's hard as heck to find a charcoal grill, because I did a cooking event there with Land O'Lakes a million years ago, and they got the wrong kind of grills for the event. And I searched all over New York City to find charcoal grills, and I can attest to how difficult that was. So anyway, you can you can get even like a smoker tube and do things like smoke your own sea salt, which is actually what I do for hostess gifts around the holidays. I smoke sea salt, and then I put them in cute little like pack containers. Or here's another one, and I'm going very Martha Stewart on this, but it's fun, and you can find this on my blog. And you can run them through the dishwasher and do nothing to them, or you can run them through the dishwasher, paint them with like gold paint, and then put food safe shellac over it. And then those are your little sea salt cellars to put your smoked sea salt in.
Oh my God, I love Martha Stewart, and that is something that she should feature, because that is a really great hack.
Yes, actually, and before I finally quit my full-time day job to be full-time grill girl, I used to go to Italy all the time with work because I was in New York all the time. And I was that crazy lady that literally I would get oysters. I'd take the shells home in my bag with me, like I said, crazy lady. But you know, like when you get the ones that are like the perfect size and they sit flat on the table, that's when you just be that person. So, but that's my hostessing gift, you know. It's and people love it because you did it yourself.
Yeah.
And it's on the table and it reminds them of you. And anyway, I digress.
The whole package. Well, Robyn, you are the whole package.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for demystifying the grill for us, and also for all your amazing tips. We're going to have your website, the link to your book on our show notes, as well as on Galavante. And thank you all for joining us today on the Ultimate Grill Tips. We cannot wait to introduce you to the next amazing person that we meet around the world.
Awesome. That was fun. Sorry, I started rambling. I get excited and I get,
awesome.
I'm like ADD.
That's amazing. I'm just going to